Hi all, I'd like to take you on a little tour in this video of top 10 outrageously aggressive openings which you can use with the move 1e4. And when I say outrageously aggressive, I really mean you can use them especially in blitz or rapid chess, and occasionally maybe as a surprise weapon in longer time controls. The reason a lot of these systems are not so popular with IMs and GMs is because there's very well worked out defences and even counter gambits to a lot of what I'm going to be recommending in this top 10. So a lot of them do belong in the Romantic era of chess, which was interrupted by the first world chess champion William Steinitz, who introduced positional play and the gradual accumulation of advantages. So he managed to systematically destroy all these attacking players of the Romantic era, and they didn't know really what happened. You know, he created a system where you could get advantages in position and store them with the pawn structure. For example, knight outposts, the advantage of the bishop pair, structural advantages. And the Romantic era was shaken. Nevertheless, there is a place, a niche, even in today's modern chess. We have online chess, we have online blitz chess, and we have over-the-board chess time controls which can be quite fast and furious, and sometimes these openings can even work on the longer time controls. So let's see what I'm talking about. Well, the first Romantic era outrageously aggressive opening after e5, let's look at e5 first, is the King's Gambit. The King's Gambit has been used by the unofficial first world champion Paul Morphy before Steinitz, and a lot of attacking players since. David Bronstein in the era of Botvinnik, for example. Boris Spassky used to play the King's Gambit. He even beat Fischer with it. So it has a great deal of credibility actually, and it's been used by many aggressive and very high level players, including world champions and world champion challengers. The thing is, it's seen as having so many different options. I think Aronian once joked in the commentary, actually I was there, he joked that there's so many things that black can choose to do, and black could even try an aggressive immediate counter gambit, the Faulkbeer counter gambit, which is outside of the scope of this. But it's an aggressive try, and you can look at numerous examples on the channel for kingscrusher, King's Gambit's blitz videos, and you can see that on blitz I've even beaten IMs, and often, well, not often, occasionally grandmasters have gone down when employing the King's Gambit. It's a great surprise weapon. So that's the first choice against e5. f4, you gambit a pawn, and the move I would follow up with is knight f3. There's another alternative in bishop c4, but the idea is you get good control of the centre, you get fast development. You can often use that f-file. There's a few interesting ideas behind it if black's really accepting the pawn, but there's so many different systems, you really need to know all the different systems that black can use as well. Okay, so the King's Gambit is the number one aggressive, kind of outrageously aggressive opening, which, you know, if you were developing a specific opening repertoire for blitz chess in particular, you might want to put this on just for fun to create some really entertaining games. Now the next thing I'd like to look at is the Danish Gambit, and I'll call them family of systems. From time to time people have mentioned, why aren't I playing the Danish Gambit? I guess one of the reasons, I've kind of done some soul searching here, the Danish Gambit is when you play d4, and if it's accepted you play c3 here. After takes now, on Livebook, you don't just use the development move knight takes c3, you try and get black to eat even more. That's the most popular move, bishop c4. So if black takes, you've got this very aggressive position where it's difficult to play with black, especially in blitz or bullet chess. It's really kind of tricky. You've got very fast piece development. The bishop's raring to go. You can connect rooks soon, and I've won many blitz games and bullet games with this Danish Gambit accepted. There are different variations in the Danish Gambit which are called slightly different things. So let's have a look. When I say the family of systems, The basic idea to get fast piece development is obviously expressed with what we've just seen here. But let's rewind this. Okay, the first thing to note is the Goring Gambit is highly related. It just inserts a different move, knight f3 first. So instead of playing the immediate d4, we're playing knight f3 in the Goring Gambit, and it's similar ideas. So after e4, e5, we play knight f3, and you get black to play knight c6, and now you play d4, ed, c3. So slight differences that you've encouraged the knight move. And again, here on taking, actually the most popular move is not knight takes c3, which you might expect, especially if you play the Smith-Morra Gambit. You might think that's enough. That has been played quite a bit here, but also bishop c4 is worth continuing sometimes with bishop c4 if you're in this gambit mood. So that's the Goring Gambit, which is obviously a relative of it. And then also we can have the Scotch game, which addresses a particular issue, really, that if you play c3, black can often play a powerful counterpunch in the centre with d5. Now you can try and address this with the move bishop c4. So this bishop c4 is kind of Scotch game territory, where you still might be interested in playing c3. So these slight nuances. And also the Italian game kind of continues a delay on the idea of d4. If we have the move here, knight f3, knight c6. Okay, so this position, the Italian game, bishop c4, bishop c5, and it looks as though black's kind of discouraged completely d4, but you just play it anyway, and you still get an interesting kind of gambit position. Now these things are not entirely sound, but there are ways of basically maximizing your development speed. And yes, the longer the time control, the kind of more dubious it could be for accumulation of advantages a la Steinitz is not going to happen. The idea of slow but sure positional play, as I say, is something which shook the Romantic era of chess very, very hard. But these systems, are very interesting for blitz chess in particular. I believe they really do have their niche. So this family that I've just introduced here, which you could call the Danish Gambit family, include the Goring Gambit, the Scotch Gambit, and the Italian Gambit. Now let's have a look at something slightly different now, in terms of the fried liver and the Lolli system. So the fried liver, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. Now instead of bishop c5 from black, it's a very interesting name, the fried liver attack, as though it's something to do with cooking. So knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6. White here in the fried liver, it's quite optimistic. White goes for that f7 square, which is a traditional target that you would teach elementary school chess players, that this is a classical kind of development and a classical target to teach about the f7 square. And black often plays d5, and after ed, one thing which quenches, or rather addresses the aggression of white and makes black's game potentially aggressive, is for black to do a counter gambit with knight a5. And this is one of the reasons this isn't so popular to try out with white, because knight a5, this is an aggressive counter gambit from black. But ignoring that, say black's not really at that level to know the counter gambit, then this can be really quite dangerous if they play knight takes d5. Now the Lolli attack system here, with black hitting the knight, is to play d4 first, then after ed, actually castle here and delay aggression on f7 to this position. And it's here where bishop e7, you can hit black with knight takes f7. And this is really dangerous. Dragging the king out like this is really quite dangerous. So that's d4 is actually, many consider d4 more aggressive than the fried liver, which is knight takes f7. So it's another little family of systems there. d4 and then castles is important because if you play the Lolli wrongly, you just end up losing a piece, basically. Knight takes d4, you can't just take on f7 here. Black has queen e7 check. That's a critical check, and then you're losing. So you've actually got to castle here, and you're waiting for that bishop e7, and then you strike with the Lolli. It's meant to be a slight upgrade on that system, because actually the fried liver attack can actually get quite tricky. If you consider this line here, knight takes f7, king takes check here. This can get quite tricky. This move, knight cb4, and white really needs to know what they're doing. But players like Shirov have played this, I know recently, from the date of this video, with some success. So this is an aggressive system, but you need to know what you're doing with this. So that's counter-attacking on c2 here, as an example. So sometimes the Lolli, the d4, the delaying action on f7, is to be preferred, actually. So this d4 move maybe is a little bit better. It's an upgrade on that. If you're thinking about punishing black with this knight excursion, knight g5. But yes, your enthusiasm will naturally be dampened as players with black start playing the counter gambit system, where they play d5, that central hit in the center, and then play knight a5, and it's just a very nice game for black, this position. That's why a lot of these openings, you can consider that they have this niche, you know, this blitz chess niche. You can consider them aggressive in inverted commas, but in longer games, the grandmasters, they choose quiet openings for a reason. It's the gradual accumulation of advantages theory set up by Steinitz. The idea of basically the motto is slow but sure, and that's not present in the Romantic era of chess. These are very dangerous systems, though, if black is cooperative and materialistic. So let's continue. So I know I'm putting a little bit of a dampener here, but this objective reality around them doesn't take away the fact that they can be used successfully in blitz chess, even against IMs and GMs. And I think mine is just one of many channels that have demonstrated that in blitz chess you can get away with a lot more. 5-minute chess, you can play a lot more interesting things. You can basically revisit the Romantic era of chess. So if anything that this video does is encourage that revisiting within the particular niche of fast chess, then that's good. So now, okay, so my fourth consideration for an aggressive, outrageous opening, straight from the Romantic era, Captain Evans, the Evans Gambit. So we have bishop c4. So let's go back from the start. e4, e5, knight f3. Let's go with knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5. So this Evans Gambit is b4 here, because white is often trying to construct a centre with c3 and d4, and this just accelerates things. And in fact, players like Nakamura have played this recently. I think there was a Nakamura against Anna game which ended in a draw. It's not that bad, especially as a surprise weapon if you're going to use it in a longer time control. It's been used by all sorts of attacking players. A lot of games from this position after c3, you're accelerating central control and carrying on in gambit fashion like this, for example. And there's a lot of games from this position. It's very, very interesting to consider the Evans Gambit. If nothing else, especially if you've just started getting into chess and want to improve your tactical skills, what you're really doing is opening up a lot of lines and piece pressure for your pieces when you lose pawns. The pawns are simply, often they're getting in the way of your pieces. So if you can let the opponent feel the pressure of your pieces, this kind of Evans Gambit is a very interesting try, because it has a very strong theme to it about constructing the centre rapidly and distracting black in, if you look at it, away from central control of d4. You're getting that b file, you're getting a fast centre set up. Often this bishop's quite dangerous on this diagonal. There's all sorts of opportunities and resources which this Evans Gambit creates. So it's another one which should be fun, especially in blitz chess and rapid chess, the Evans Gambit. Okay, another great one, and this is really, really kind of outrageous, and you might want to use it for the special occasion of Halloween. If we go back, it starts with the 4 knights defense, which is not very original. 1 knight, 2 knights, and then we have the 3rd knight, and we have the 4 knights defense. So here in the 4 knights, just knight takes e5 is the Halloween gambit, and there's a system. It's a very interesting system, which I've done a video on. You might want to look at. But like with these other gambits, there are very aggressive things that black can do if they know what they're doing. For example, black could even just get timely find a way to timely give the piece back. But if black has his knights chased, then you get very interesting compensation. If the knight goes back here, for example, then this position can get a bit tricky for black. So it can be great fun to play, and I have won against some very strong players with this. It just remains a very interesting surprise weapon, and especially if the opponent is put on the back foot, the knights are going back, you can get very, very good compensation, and you create these complications which are very difficult to manage, especially at the faster time controls. But definitely it's fairly unsound and not really seen in standard play chess for obvious reasons. And also, yeah, there's very dangerous counter gambit systems. I mean, black could play bishop b4. This might not be the best try, this queen g4, d5. This is one example where this actually might be okay for white, this position here. a3, this is a live book example, and this for example should be okay for white. But there are other systems which can be even more aggressive for black, because black's got that option to counter sacrifice. That's one of the fundamental flaws of these gambits, that if you give up a piece to try and get an exciting game, the cold shower can be given to you if black gives back the piece in some way. Knight c6, for example, d5, bishop b4. I think this is known as one way for black to aggressively give back the piece and basically say, where's your advantage? We're transposing into something in another system which is a kind of standard position in any case, so it's not too bad for white. It's meant to be about equal according to live book, this sort of thing. So that's why they're not aggressive if the opponent is not cooperating with these gambit systems. Then you can end up statistically in non-aggressive positions. So that's why sometimes perhaps it's best to keep a separate repertoire if you want a repertoire of aggressive openings for longer time control games, which are based more on the accumulation of advantages theory set up by Steinitz. This is like another Romantic era kind of thing, this Halloween gambit against the 4 knights. The Sicilian defense is another very, very popular move, and of course I'm going to practice what I preach as well. I recommend this, and I still play this quite a lot against the Sicilian, the Smith-Morra Gambit, which for a long time I was calling it the Morra-Smith Gambit, so taking an NC3. And there's actually a book by an IM on it, Esserman, who outlines very aggressive approaches in many different variations. If black wants to give you the cold shower, many players with black are trying to kill the fun of it after c3 with an early knight f6. But I've discovered recently, you can actually unsettle some opponents by playing bishop d3 here. This is an interesting try. Bishop d3. For example, if d5, then e5, and black could get into serious trouble after e6, for example. Ouch, check, and then be mated. So there's interesting things you can do even after knight f6. Not all the fun's been taken out, but the aggression to a large extent is not there. If you play e5, then you're entering basically Alpine opening territory, which is not wildly aggressive, but black has the defensive knight dislodged from the king side. So in this sort of position, you can sometimes get some sort of attack going later. In any case, this is a very playable position for white, but it means that if you play the Smith-Morra Gambit, you really need to perhaps get a book on the Alpine, the c3 Sicilian opening, which will transpose into a lot of the territories here. That if against the Sicilian you played c3, which is a very, very popular system, the Alpine opening, you might as well get a book on that if you're going to be playing the Smith-Morra Gambit. And this is very suitable for the accumulation of small advantages. So you can play this c3 system as a surprise weapon against the Sicilian, not the mainline Sicilian, but a way of establishing perhaps a small advantages which you can accumulate later on. So yes, the Morra Smith or Smith-Morra and the c3 Sicilian are kind of the same sort of family, because black is often against the Smith-Morra not accepting your gambit. They're often playing this fun killing move knight f6, and the main move, as I say, theoretically you should be playing e5, but I've found some fun with bishop d3, which is only 2 games actually in live book compared to 373 with e5. So that's an interesting little family there, the Smith-Morra and the c3 Sicilian, the Alpine territory. Now, just to give you some more protection against different types of openings or ideas, against the Caro-Kann, you might want something interesting. And there's another little family going on here of ideas with f3. You can play f3 immediately here, called the fantasy variation, and there is a particular video on the channel if you want to search for fantasy variation. And sometimes you can be given an aggressive f file. So takes here, you've got this f file. Black might want to play e5, and you've got to be very careful here about the queen h4 check. You know, if you take here queen h4, ouch, not very good. So you'd end up after e5 playing knight f3, but you get this position, say e takes d4, black's being a bit greedy, which is quite interesting with that f file. It's sharper than usual. That f file could give you some interesting victories and fast developments. It's got a lot in common with some of the other things we've looked at. So the fantasy variation is very interesting. You might want to consider branches of that in that same family. Knight c3 takes Milner-Barry f3. So putting the insertion of knight c3 here is interesting. So I think Milner-Barry, well, I've made notes, Milner-Barry's made use of this. So that's in the fantasy variation. So that was Sir Stuart Milner-Barry, a great British player. There's also a von Hennig variation, where you allow, after d takes e4, you play actually bishop c4, knight f6, and f3. So von Hennig variation. So all obviously of the same idea, that white wants to grab this f file like the King's Gambit in effect. So often you'll see with these gambits, we're trying to accelerate piece development and have these open lines, and we want to get the opponent to feel the power of our pieces. The pawns are often getting in the way, so the solution is a simple one. You sacrifice 1 or 2 pawns, you get extra piece development, extra pressure, and you've got to find the tactical resources later though, so you've got to have an attention to detail. So not talking about strategic long-term concerns of the position, but you've got to be prepared for the hand-to-hand battles and be looking for seemingly ridiculous resources which will exploit your lead in development, your piece pressure. So you've got to be tactically minded to get real results from these systems. So against the Caro-Kann, there's some food for thoughts there with the fantasy variation. So we go about that f3 idea, or you can delay the f3 with knight c3, but f3 the fantasy variation. And black might want to aggressively counter a gambit. You need to know about this e5, very aggressive counter gambit. But apparently, according to live book, this should be okay, even though black's trying to expose this diagonal very aggressively. White should actually be okay here. It looks dangerous, but knight a4 here, inviting things like bishop f2. This should be okay for white. This has been played before, it can lead to some crazy stuff, basically, the fantasy variation if black wants to play that violent e5 move. So that's something you should really book up for. Now let's go on to against the Pierce defense, the Perk defense. Now this system here is a little bit different from the others in that you can play it in long games. It has been played in long games numerous times. So against the Pierce, you can play what's called literally the Austrian Attack. So it sounds aggressive if it's got the word attack in it, and it is aggressive, and I've played it successfully many times in Blitz, and you can see numerous examples of that, the Austrian Attack, if you search for Blitz videos with Austrian Attack. So often white is actually going for a direct attack on even the H file. Yeah, it's just a very, very aggressive position to play with. To start off with here, you can play bishop d3, bishop e3. These are popular moves. Bishop d3, for example, and here castling. If e5, so you've got this aggressive kind of center, and look at that f file. You're getting the aggressive f file later. There's a famous game, Fischer beat Palbenko in this line. If you want to search for that, Fischer against Palbenko on, say, chessgames.com, where he won in 21 moves in the this Austrian Attack. So this is not just a romantic era opening. This is something you can play in longer games without too much fear of squandering your advantage for white if you assume the best possible stuff from the opponents. So it's not as unsound as the other recommendations, but I'm saying the others have this niche, especially in Blitz chess. But this is perfectly a tried and tested system, the Austrian Attack, and very, very popular to play in such a way. So often players with white here are playing knight f3. Let's look at the particular move order. So knight c3. If we look at another move order, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3. This is a more common way of seeing the Austrian. So g6, and then we can have f4 here. And there's loads of games with this sequence. So knight f3, bishop d3. There's loads and loads of games with this sequence, over 2,000 with bishop d3. So that's really a very credible system for all sorts of time limits, not just Blitz. Okay, so we've looked at a variety of openings, coming to number 9 now, and this is something which I've been thinking I should be playing against the center counter. There's an intriguing thing you can do, a little trick, if you're playing against the center counter, which you might consider outrageously aggressive, is to play actually d4 and transpose it. If black plays now d takes, Smith-Morra Gambit, transposition. So you play knight c3 here, and say knight f6, f3, you're trying to peel open that f file. If black takes, what they've done is not only accelerate your developments, they've given you an extra semi-open file pressure here. So they've got a bit more material. Of course, technically black's better, but they really need to know what they're doing. Otherwise, there could be some disasters heading their way, especially in Blitz. So if you've been struggling against this center counter in Blitz, yes, why not just transpose it into this Gambit system, which if you start to master the f3 systems like in the other recommendations, you'll get used to that f file and finding resources on that f file for great attacks. So just transpose it here into the Smith-Morra Gambit. It's an interesting idea against d5. And I've played often, and there is a video on it, the Retti Gambit. So b3, you just fianchetto here, let black have that pawn, and again you can play for a later f3. If, for example, knight here, But instead of f3, you might also want to play g4. So in fact, g4 is a lot more popular, or queen e2 to try and castle queenside. For example, like this, you can get back your pawn with knight takes e4, and this isn't a bad position. And it's even being used in correspondence chess from time to time. So even though, yeah, black's for a moment a pawn up, you might not have to play f3. You can also play g4 to play bishop g2 and try and get the pawn back without losing a pawn with f3. So it's an interesting system in its own right, the Retti Gambit, the temporary sacrifice of the e-pawn. If you want to get French defense players out of their comfort zone, this is really something to bear in mind, this knight c3, queen e2 idea. There's over 100 games actually in live book with it, this position. So it's a very interesting one. If black wants to try and punish you with knight c6, you can cover that d4 square a little bit. If knight d4, this is okay now, queen d3 actually. Yeah, so it's an interesting idea, this Retti Gambit. So I hope there's some inspiration here, not to be dissuaded just because an opening is unsound basically. You know, there's particular niches for it, and even super grandmasters, especially for example more adventurous ones like Nakamura, they often, well, occasionally rather, they do reel out romantic era gambits, even in long FIDE time control games where the game is lasting, you know, many hours on a particular day. Sometimes they do reel them out as surprise weapons. And sometimes even players like Kasparov, one of the greatest players ever, sometimes has played some of these gambits as well. So some of them are not completely unemployed in the longer time limits. But I would say the niche that I've been trying to emphasize is, you know, in Blitz, in our casual online chess, for most club players, you know, there are lots of mistakes in club level chess. So playing an interesting opening where you might be down on material, but you get some interesting piece pressure compensation, this repertoire could be very interesting to consider sometimes, just maybe as a surprise weapon, or, you know, just to make your games more entertaining. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.